What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. The Detroit Lions schedule has officially been released. It was leaked pretty much all throughout yesterday and officially released pretty late into the afternoon. And today we're just going to take a look at it, a little bit of an unscripted video. We'll go through the preseason matchups. We'll go through the regular season matchups, talk about the good, the bad, some of the tougher stretches, some of the easier stretches, and just kind of go over a general first reaction of the schedule. I have seen it, but I haven't really thought too much about all the matchups, about kind of the streaks that the Detroit Lions are going to go on both home and away. So we'll go through it. We'll talk about some matchups. We'll give a prediction for each matchup, a win or a loss. And then, of course, at the end, come up with a regular season total victory and kind of just talk about a general sense of how the Lions season could potentially go. Starting off with the Detroit Lions preseason schedule. They play 4 preseason games, including one on the 31st of July to kick off the NFL preseason. They play the Chargers, then they are at Atlanta, and then they are home for both the Miami Dolphins and the Houston Texans. Now, the Detroit Lions themselves probably aren't the biggest fans of playing 4 preseason games, but as a fan of, who loves the team and loves all the depth pieces all the way down to guys like Broderick Martin, I'm excited. I want to see how a lot of the young rookies play. I want to see how some of the second-year guys play. I'm excited to see an extra game of Hendon Hooker, an extra game of Giovanni Manu, an extra game of just different players that are going to get opportunities to play. Sione Vaki is another one that I'm really excited to see. Again, preseason doesn't mean a whole lot for the starters. It doesn't mean a whole lot for even the rotational guys, the Khalif Raymonds and the Tim Patricks and the, those type of players, the Malcolm Rodriguez's of the roster. But it is a good chance to see some of the young players. It's a great opportunity to see Hendon Hooker, a great opportunity. We're going to get to see guys like Giovanni Manu and Miles Frazier on the offensive line, maybe even Tate Ratledge, but potentially in a very limited capacity. I think we'll see guys like Ennis Rakestraw for a short time during some of these preseason games, and really just a good opportunity to see some of the young blossoming talent on this roster and get a good sense of where they're at going into the year from a depth perspective, knowing how talented they are on offense. Going into week 1, the Detroit Lions will travel to Green Bay at 4:25 Eastern Standard Time on CBS, and they will play in what is likely America's game of the week to open the NFL season. They will not play the Eagles on Thursday Night Football to officially open the regular season, but they will have a primetime game in week 1, just as they did a season ago. I think the Lions and the Packers are an interesting one. Both times they played last year, it was a pretty competitive, pretty competent game. The Lions, of course, went 2-0 last season with a big win in Lambeau and then a less dominant victory in Detroit. But obviously going back and looking at that game, seeing the injuries that the Lions suffered throughout that game and throughout the rest of the season prior, there was a reason that game was pretty close. I don't think the Lions give up 35 points on defense again. I still think their offense can put up 35, 40 points on the Packers. I do think the Packers got better. I think Marcus Golden was a good pickup throughout the draft. I thought they had a pretty solid draft overall. And, just overall, I think they're a good football team. I think they're going to win 10 games, but I do think the Detroit Lions are better. Home field advantage on the road week 1. I could certainly see a loss, but I do think the Lions will pull this one out. They've had Green Bay's number for the last couple of years. You could make the argument that the Lions are going to be a little bit rusty going into this game with the new coordinators, with some new scheme, with so many players returning from injury. So I could see a loss here, but I will say a victory to open the season, much like they did a year ago, and really since they've done ever since the 2022 season. Going to week 2, the Lions host the Chicago Bears. They are at Ford Field for a 1 o'clock kickoff for their home opener of the season. I think they're going to win this game. I think it's going to take a couple weeks for Caleb Williams to find a connection with his new receivers. I think it's going to find time for Ben Johnson's scheme to really impact this Chicago Bears team. And while I think they are talented enough to defeat the Detroit Lions, they took them to a really close game a season ago on Thanksgiving. I don't think that they're going to be ready to take on the Lions at home in their home opener. The Lions have a game to knock off the rust. I think a lot of their systems and schematically, they will be very similar to what they were last year, so it won't take them as long to get caught up to speed. I could see the Chicago Bears taking 3 to 4 games to really get going and really finding their groove under Ben Johnson. So I do think the Lions take that. At worst, I think they're 1-1 in this first 2-game stretch already, a third of their games over in the division, but obviously that could change. It could be 0-2. I think worst case scenario, they're 1-1. I think likely they're 2-0, but that is a tough one to start the season. They then go on the road to Baltimore for Monday Night Football, and I do think they'll take a loss. The Ravens are a good football team. I think it'll be more competitive than the last time they played the Ravens, but the last time they played the Ravens, they definitely had the Lions number. They don't play very well versus mobile quarterbacks. I think Lamar Jackson's going to put up a lot of big numbers in that game. It's going to come down to the offense being able to put up big points back. And last time they couldn't do that. Can they do it this time? It's going to be really tough, but I do think they lose this game. So I have 2-1 through 3 weeks. They come home versus Cleveland. They should decimate Cleveland, whether it's Shedeur Sanders, whether it's Dylan Gabriel, whether it's Joe Flacco, whether it's Deshaun Watson. It doesn't matter. I think that the Browns are not a very talented roster at this point. They were picking top 5 for a reason. Well, I think they made a good move to pick up additional first-round picks in the Mason Graham trade. I don't think they're quite ready to compete. I think they'll be probably a bottom 10 team in football this year. And I do think that they will lose that game as well. So I think I have the Detroit Lions starting 3-1 on the season. They then go to Cincinnati, which is a tough one. Cincinnati usually takes a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple months to really find their groove, much like I talked about with the Chicago Bears. I think they have a ton of offensive potential, but especially if Trey Hendrickson is not playing, I could see this game being very similar to, the 49ers game a year ago, where every single possession teams are scoring and scoring and scoring, and it's a 42-38 kind of game, a 42-35 type of game. I think the Lions pull it out. I think they're a more well-rounded, a better football team, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. The Bengals don't run the ball especially well. They're going to have to live and die and win their games through the air. I think the secondary of Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch being healthy with Ennis Rakestraw, I think is just going to be a lot for the Bengals to handle. And while I do think they'll put up 28, maybe even 35 points, I do think the Lions will be able to pull off this game in a very old-fashioned Lions win, right? You go back to the Chargers a few years ago where they were winning 42-38 and converting a fourth down to just have a chance to take the lead at the end of the game. I think it's going to be that kind of game. I think it'll be high scoring. It'll be a fun one, but a tough one to win. I do think eventually, though, they will be 4-1. They go to Arrowhead, a tough game for sure. I would not be surprised if they dropped this game. With that being said, I think they could do a lot of what the Eagles did last year with Aiden Hutchinson, potentially Marcus Davenport, Al-Qaeda Muhammad, and, just some of the pass rushers that they have. Aiden Hutchinson's going to be back. He's going to be wreaking havoc. The linebackers are going to be back. The secondary is going to be good. They don't have nearly as much depth at the pass rush that the Eagles did, but they have a significantly better pass rusher in Aiden Hutchinson to worry about. I think him with Tyleik Williams and DJ Reader and hopefully a healthy Marcus Davenport can cause that kind of havoc, cause that kind of pressure, and really be a good part of it. I think the Chiefs' offensive line is still a little bit shaky and certainly questionable. So if they can take advantage of that, I could certainly see it. But to be conservative, I'll say the Lions lose in Arrowhead on primetime on Sunday Night Football, dropping their record to 4-2 on the year. They return back home in week 7 to Tampa Bay. I think they take this game. I know Tampa beat them in week 2 a season ago, but Jared Goff threw 2 interceptions. He threw 52 passes. They ran the ball very well against Tampa Bay. I think if John Morton can stick with that game plan, I think if he can still run the ball very effectively and stick with the game plan, they should be able to beat Tampa Bay just like they did in the divisional round. Not a convincing win necessarily, not a easy walk in the park win by any means. This is a game that is probably 60-40 as far as, when the betting line comes out, right? It'll probably be 60% Lions and 40% on the Buccaneers. But I do think the Lions are more talented. I do think, especially if they're healthy, the Detroit Lions are a better football team. And this is a game that they're not going to overlook again. Right? They went into Tampa Bay playing them for the second time in just 4 games. And I think they went into that saying, okay, well, we beat them in a close game in weeks, 5 a year ago. We beat them in the divisional round to go to the NFC Championship game. And I think they came in a little cocky. I think, Ben Johnson came in a little pass happy. If they can really dial in and do what they did well at the end of the season and play like they did in that divisional round, I think with an improved defense, I think with just a better balance on offense going into the game with that strategy, they should be able to win this game by 7 to 10 points, getting a revenge victory from what cost them a potential perfect season a year ago. They go into their bye week in week 8, which is quite a good mark for the Lions. They usually have their bye week in week 5 or week 6. So week 8 is pretty good. About halfway through the season, they get to rest before they welcome Minnesota. Minnesota, of course, has the question mark of the rookie quarterback. They have beaten Minnesota for, I believe, 5 of the last 6 games, and I believe the last 5 in a row. Minnesota's time is coming, and I do think they split with Minnesota this year. However, I don't think they're going to drop one at home. I think they're going to drop one on the road towards the end of the season, which isn't good, but I don't think that JJ McCarthy is walking into Ford Field and taking a victory from the jaws of the Detroit Lions. He might be able to do it at home, right? Especially when he's a little bit more settled in towards the end of the season, especially if they have something to play for. But I think early, week 9, the 9th game of his career in a hostile environment versus a very good defense that has turned the ball over against Minnesota many times over the past 2 seasons. I think it goes to Detroit, which I believe puts them at 6-2 on the year with just 2 losses to both Kansas City and Baltimore. They go to Washington. I think they beat Washington. I really, really do. I know they lost by 14 in the divisional round, but again, just like the Tampa Bay game, they got pass happy. Jared Goff threw 4 interceptions, and Jameson Williams, of course, threw another one. Jared Goff had a fumble, and the Lions had 5 turnovers in that game that cost them the game, right? They had a turnover in the red zone. They had a pick 6. They had another turnover in the red zone at halftime. You eliminate those turnovers. You run the ball like you did. A lot of people forget the Lions were up 7-3 with a minute left to go in the first quarter. Had they run the ball in that 3rd and 1 instead of going empty, they very well could have had a 14-3 lead going into the second quarter. They obviously didn't do that. Again, I think John Morton will be more realistic to sticking to the run game, sticking to the game plan, not having to prove the haters wrong when it comes to Jared Goff not being the best quarterback in the NFL. He's going to hand it to Jahmyr Gibbs. He's going to hand it to a healthy David Montgomery. He's going to hand it to I think, even better offensive line than was a year before. I think they take another victory going to 7-2. I do think they drop one against Philadelphia. Philly's a hard place to go play. They're the reigning Super Bowl champions, and while they may have a Super Bowl slump, I don't see it. They're a super talented team. Jalen Hurts is very good. Saquon Barkley's tough to stop. Obviously, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, and that defense is very strong. It'll be a close game. I think this will be probably the best game of the season, which is why it's on Sunday Night Football in Week 11. But I do think the Eagles take it, dropping the Detroit Lions to 8-3 on the season. So, still having a good year, but dropping a couple of close ones. A close one to Philly, a close one to Baltimore, a close one to Kansas City. They're going to drop a couple. They're not going to go 15-2 again this year, but I do think they'll be quite good. New York Giants, I think they win this game. Not a whole lot to say. Rookie quarterback, bad football team. I think they're getting better. I think their pass rush is solid. I think they have a good weapon in Malik Neighbors. I think they have a bright young quarterback in Jackson Dart. But overall, I don't think they compete this year. I think they win probably 6, maybe 7 games, but I don't think they compete with Detroit. 9-3 overall. They host Green Bay on Thanksgiving on Thursday at 1 p.m. I think they take it again. Green Bay was a missed field goal or a blocked field goal away from being 0-6 in the division last year. The Detroit Lions handled them pretty easily in Lambeau a season ago when they were even somewhat relatively healthy in the secondary and at the linebacking position. Now you add back Aiden Hutchinson, you add back Elaine McNeil, who could be returning at this time. You have a good shot, I think, to sweep the Packers yet again. And even though it's not an easy thing to do, I do think they will do it, improving to 9-3. I think they handle the Dallas Cowboys much like they did a season ago. Probably not by as many points, but I think they still handle them by a good 10 to 14 points. They are a very dominant football team. And while Dallas is not a bad football team, I do question the coaching hire throughout the offseason. I question the process throughout the offseason. I didn't think their draft or their free agency was particularly good. Again, I think they'll be a 6, 7, 8 win team, but I do think the Lions handle them pretty easily at home, especially. And I think they take a big one there, improving to, what would that be, 10-3, 11-3 on the season. Los Angeles, they go to Los Angeles. They play Matthew Stafford and the Rams yet again. Round 5, I believe, in the matchup since Matthew Stafford's been traded. The Detroit Lions have a winning record in this matchup. They lost the first one, but have won the 2 prior. So round 4 for the Detroit Lions, I think, goes the Lions' way as well. They will play this game very close. This could be another overtime game. And the Rams are one of those teams that do what the Lions do back to them, right? They play physical. They play with good receivers. They throw into tight windows. They're not afraid to go for it on 4th down. They're not afraid to get tricky. They're not afraid to move pieces around the line of scrimmage. They're not afraid of anybody. And I think that plays into the Rams' advantage. I think it's what the Lions do to a lot of teams. So when teams do it back to the Lions, it's a little bit of a culture shock. But I still think they take it against the Rams. The Rams are a good football team. I think they're an 11-6, 12-5 football team. This will be a close one, but I have them losing a couple of games early in the season, fixing some things and tuning some things up. I do think they take a tough one on the road here versus Los Angeles. I think they take a pretty easy one down the road in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh always starts strong and finishes really weak. I think they take one against Pittsburgh, going to, I believe, 12-3 at this point in the season. Like I said, I do think they drop one to Minnesota, so I'll put them at 12-4. And then it comes down to the Chicago Bears to end the year. Do I think Chicago is going to compete for the division? No, I don't. I think Ben Johnson's good. I think that Caleb Williams is good. I think the receivers are good. I think that the offensive line is good. I'm not sold on the running back position. I don't know how good their run game is actually going to be. I'm not totally sold on their defense being elite. I think it's going to be average, maybe slightly above average. I think they'll win 8, 9, maybe even 10 games this year. I don't think they'll compete for the division. I think they'll compete for the wild card. I think they'll compete for the playoffs. I think they'll give the Detroit Lions some trouble, especially at Soldier Field. And I actually think that they're going to take it. I've convinced myself that they are going to take that in Soldier Field, meaning I think the Detroit Lions will finish 12-5 this year. I do think they'll finish, first in the North. I think they'll be 4-2 in the division. I think they'll be roughly 4-4 on the road, maybe 3-5 with an excellent home record, a really tough road record, right? You go on the road, obviously, to Minnesota and Chicago to end the year. You go to LA, you go to Green Bay to start the season. You go to Philly, to Washington, to Kansas City, to Cincinnati, and to Baltimore. It's a tough road schedule. I think if they can even pull out 3-5 on that, I think they can go undefeated at home. Their home schedule really isn't that tough. I think even if they go 3-5 on the road, they'll be 12-5 on the season. If they go 4-4 on the road, I think that they're a 13-4 football team. The Lions are good. The Lions are extremely good. If they can stay any sort of healthy this year, they should be a top contender in the NFC. They should be a top contender in the North. I think Minnesota and Chicago are going to finish around 10, 11 wins. I think Green Bay is going to be around 9-10. It will be a very deep, a very competitive division. I think all of these teams could finish above 500, but I still believe pound for pound at every single position comparatively, the Detroit Lions are the best team in the North. I don't think the coordinators change that because I don't think the coordinators will get worse. I think the coaching staff actually got better this offseason outside of the coordinators. So at the positions and at different, coordinators with pass game, run game, and stuff like that, they are a good football team. And I do think they will win a lot of games. 12-5, I think, is where I'm at with the Lions schedule right now. We'll obviously take a closer look as those games come along, as training camp happens, as different things develop. But I do think the Lions will win 12-13 games this year. I think at the absolute worst, they win 11 and sneak into the wild card as a 5 seed. They're a good football team, and I think they're going to win a lot of games. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Let me know down in the comments below your opinions on this game, on really the whole season in general. What did you think about the schedule? There's a couple tough stretches in there. I think going to Washington, then going to Philly, then hosting Minnesota, then then going to LA is a tough stretch there for four straight games. They have a couple tough stretches, but I think they'll be good. They were fantastic on the road a season ago. They're an excellent football team. They should be much healthier this year. And even though the record may regress by a couple of wins, I think they'll be a far more competitive football team come playoff time than they were a year ago. So again, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your opinions. Do you think the Lions are going to fall off and maybe only win 9-10 games with a tough, really tough schedule? Or do you think they'll rise above the criticism? They'll rise above the overrated hate talk, and they'll, return to 13-4 to 12-5. I'd love to hear your guys' opinion. But with that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.